Welcome everyone to the Howl podcast, where we feature guests from various backgrounds with captivating stories to tell. And our goal is to bring people together by sharing diverse perspectives and experiences to inspire positive change in the world. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Howl and Gale Entertainment, and also give us a rating on Spotify if you haven't already. And our next guest for today is Camille Aragon, a Filipina-American comedian, actress, and educator in LA, seen at top SoCal comedy clubs like the Comedy Store and Flappers, and acted in her recent films such as The Perfect Couple and Good Filipino Kids. She also earned her master's degree in education in Harvard with a BA in psychology from UCLA, and she also served in the Peace Corps in the Eastern Caribbean. And we're very excited for this episode and to also hear and learn more about Camille's journey, as well as her upcoming show on Friday, September 22nd. And without further ado, please welcome Camille Aragon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. Also, excited to see your show. I'm going to really try to make it. I don't know if I've told you already, I haven't been in a comedy show ever.
Yeah, you mentioned that. And this is a great place to go for your first comedy show. It's a fun venue. It's at the Comedy Chateau in North Hollywood. So it's a great spot because the food's really good. The drinks are really good. I have a good number of people going. So it's, if you don't know anybody there, I'm going to introduce you to folks so you can hang out. And the comics are always just like a really great lineup that they showcase there. And sometimes you never know who's going to show up at the comedy clubs in LA, which is one of the great things about like being in the comedy scene and being a fan of comedy in Los Angeles is you could think you're just going to see some people that haven't made it yet. And then randomly some big name star just shows up because they feel like running some material. So you never know what's going to happen.
Yes, you never know. Super excited to be there. And I don't know, maybe some big stars will be there too. We'll see.
We'll see.
So let's start off with just you introducing yourself to the audiences of the Howl, since, people may or may have not heard about you. So just kindly introduce yourself and also your background too.
Sure. Well, my name is Camille Aragon. Like you said, I am a Filipina-American stand-up comedian and actress. I started making my way into the entertainment industry, I'd say about 5-6 years ago. I started with just kind of improv classes randomly just for personal development. And it kind of opened up this it awakened this passion, I guess, that I have for being a storyteller and a performer. And it kind of led me down this rabbit hole that ultimately, I think, moved me towards stand-up comedy, which I've always had a lot of respect for stand-up comedians, but to be able to do it now just feels like such a gift. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what my place is in the entertainment industry right now. But prior to working in entertainment, I have been an educator. Like you mentioned, I earned my master's degree in education from Harvard. I was a psychology nerd. I went to UCLA and studied psychology. I've worked with a lot of different communities. I also served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Eastern Caribbean. And so I think ultimately my passions lie within the world of activism and social justice. And I think that ultimately, I moved into this world of being an actor or an artist because I recognize that this is a very effective way of moving people and educating people in a way that really sticks with them. A lot of people go through school and they don't really remember the lessons they learned, but maybe they watch a movie or see some piece of art that sticks with them forever, that they relate to so deeply that it can even change their worldview or open up a new perspective. So yeah, that's kind of how my life path has led me through all these different interests and passions that have kind of led me to where I am now, balancing all these different roles.
Yes, that's totally a lot of different roles for sure. And tell us a little bit more about your journey, like earning a master's degree in education at Harvard to becoming an entertainer and also like a comedian and actress in Los Angeles. Because, that seems to be like a totally different field, right? So how did that transition happen for you?
Well, I think a lot, like many children of immigrants, I think my parents hoped that I would become a doctor. And I quickly learned in college I wasn't good at science. I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And then I was just not doing well in these science classes that were prerequisites of like going to medical school. But I did really enjoy and excel in psychology. So that was really something that I was interested in. And then when I was thinking about what I was going to do after undergraduate, I knew I wanted to continue my studies in psychology, but I wasn't quite sure the direction. And I had this wonderful mentor when I was at UCLA who had done this specific program at Harvard in education that was focused in psychology. And she wrote me this glowing letter of recommendation. And I ended up going in through that program myself. But they're learning and realizing that I didn't want to continue in academia. So after I graduated with my master's degree, I started to work in social justice projects, a lot of public service focused work. So I worked for nonprofits. My first job out of school was working for an early literacy nonprofit that served underprivileged preschool aged children in teaching them how to read. And that became kind of my focus for the next few years was early literacy. I had been exposed to the idea of the Peace Corps when I was working in that nonprofit sector. We would always have to like recruit volunteers to work for this nonprofit that I was employed by. And we always kind of got sat at these recruitment events next to the Peace Corps table. And my coworker at the time would like bring materials over and I'd be like, oh, that's so cute that you want to do the Peace Corps. And lo and behold, a few years later, I went through this whole journey of, I guess, kind of self-healing. I also became a yoga teacher. I think I forgot to mention that in my bio, but a big part of my life, and my adult life specifically, has been really healing through practices like yoga and meditation, energy healing such as Reiki. And I did a lot of self-reflection during that time. So through that process, I decided, okay, maybe the Peace Corps is actually something that I do want to do. And it was really like a beautiful, complicated, very complex adventure of the mind, body, and soul to do something like that.
And for people who don't know what Peace Corps means, like what is
Sure.
that exactly? Yeah.
Right. So the Peace Corps is the United States international volunteer service. So they take trained Americans and send them to countries that have a partnership with the United States to live and work within their communities at the community level to promote the values of the Peace Corps. So sharing American values, learning about the values of the other country, working together to bring to bring those values back home to the States, and then sharing about these kind of cross-cultural connections. So when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I was stationed in the Eastern Caribbean, which when people heard that, they were like, why would they send the Peace Corps there? But a lot of people only see kind of the glossy images of what the Caribbean looks like on commercials. And I was in like a very rural village in a country called St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So it was a beautiful experience. It was really intense. But it was also part of my life that was fundamental in helping me to realize that I am a creative person and I'm an artist. The people that I gravitated to the most in those communities were people that were creating art as a source of livelihood and also a source of healing for their communities. Like I had met this really wonderful woman. Her name is Vani Rudette. She was a writer. She's an artist. She was a beautiful weaver of baskets, and she was also the college teacher for a lot of students in their art program. And I just remember like kind of soaking up all of the lessons she was teaching them, and getting to work with them was just such a beautiful experience, and really helped to open myself up to my own creativity, which I didn't really have access to at the time.
Mm-hmm. And then you became a comedian as well. Like, how did that happen too? Because I imagine like, trying to make people laugh, like even for me, is like so hard to do. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So I guess what happened was, it was a really pretty long journey. I think I was still very much entrenched in the world of education, and there was another job I had working for a nonprofit after I had gotten back from the Peace Corps, and I was teaching people about education. I was teaching educators about the effects of stress and trauma, and how to use mindfulness techniques to mitigate that stress and trauma for themselves and for their students. And I would teach these like 2-day long trainings to educators. And while I loved the content that it was speaking about that was related to my job, my favorite moments of those training sessions would be when I would lighten the mood and get the room to laugh. I was like, this is really interesting. Like, this is what is feeding me. And I've also been a yoga teacher for a long time. So that was also something that I enjoyed, was connecting with groups of people and kind of working with that energy. And I would always try to like crack a joke just to lighten the mood. Sometimes people can be very serious when they get to a yoga class, and you just want to, kind of keep it nice and keep the levity around in the room. So I took some improv classes, and that kind of sparked an interest in acting. I started taking acting classes. And while I really loved improv, I just found myself really gravitating towards watching stand-up. So I would watch more stand-up, and then, SNL would come on and be like, I'm not really interested in watching that. Let me watch another stand-up special. And then there was a stand-up comedy class close to where I live that was taking place in Long Beach. So I decided that I was going to take a stand-up comedy class. And one of the things with a lot of stand-up comedy classes is they'll have a showcase at the end. So you invite all your friends, your family to come support you, and they laugh at all your jokes. And then the class kind of like, lets you go on to whatever is going to happen next in your journey. So, well, the interesting thing about that was I was taking that class, about to do the showcase, and at the same time I was reading Ali Wong's book, Dear Girls, and I was on the chapter where she talks to her daughters about what it's like to be a stand-up comedian. And she was like, if you ever take a stand-up comedy class, I'm going to disown you as my children. She's like, those things are hacks. They only come because they're your friends. They're only laughing at you because they're your friends. So I was like, oh, dang, let me rethink this. So I took this, I went through with the showcase. People laughed. It felt great. But I also did it with a grain of salt, being like, okay, I know they're my friends. They're here to support me. So the next week I went to an open mic, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anyone that I knew that I was going to do this open mic. I was like, I'm going to go by myself. And if I can make strangers laugh, then I'll keep going. And strangers laughed. So I was like, okay. So I started to figure out the open mic scene, and then that thing just kind of takes on a life of its own. You go to open mics, you meet other people, you get onto shows, and then you just kind of build your community and your reputation that way.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear, because, yeah, like I said, like I've never actually been in a comedy show before, but I can see like the tension, like whenever you're like public speaking, there's a lot of pressure that's happening when you're like on the stage. At least like in my mindset, like, okay, how do I make all these diverse people laugh, right? But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I do want to get your insights into your world of acting as well, right? Like, can you tell a little bit more about kind of the roles that you've been getting into and what kind of like roles and genres you want to explore more? Because I saw The Perfect Couple and you did such an amazing job on that drama. Do you want to focus more on dramas, or like what kind of genres do you want to go to?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that I was cast in The Perfect Couple, and it was a story that felt very close to my own identity. And I feel really grateful that that was one of my first kind of really lead roles in a project. So that was written by Mike Talplacito, and I just feel like I connected so much to that story. And I would love to continue doing dramatic pieces too, because I think I have a lot of source material within myself to tell those kinds of stories. But I do also love the idea of still continuing to do stand-up. And, you know, like I already mentioned Ali Wong, but has a career that I really admire, because she has been able to pivot from doing stand-up to also take on roles like she did in Beef, where she's taking on a very dramatic role that's not very funny. And, you know, in my role in The Perfect Couple, like, I don't have any jokes. Like, my character's not the funny character in that story. She's the one who's kind of driving the drama and the betrayal that's happening in between the lines. So I think that was really great. I also did a play several years ago called The Reindeer Monologues, and I got to be this really traumatized character that just exudes all of this emotion on stage, and I really, really loved that. I did a play recently called #Don't that was also written by Mike Talplacito, and that character was a lot more fun. She was very big. I played a Filipino beauty queen, so I was kind of just very out there. And so, yeah, I enjoy a lot of different characters. I think with a lot of actors, we want to take on roles that are different from each other, because part of the appeal of being an actor is getting to experience worlds and people's lives that are different than your own. And that helps you grow as an artist and even just as a human being to develop that kind of awareness and tapping into the psychology of somebody who has different experiences than you do. So I'm open to all kinds of roles for anyone out there listening and casting projects.
There you go. No, I was going to say, since you're already a comedian, wouldn't it make sense for you to do more comedy TV shows or like films, etc.? Is that something you maybe see yourself doing in the future?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm really open. I think there's so much to be gleaned from comedy and comedic acting. And I think that there is a specialness about being a stand-up comic. Like, part of what I envision for myself too is to write material for not just myself, but other people and underrepresented groups, for us to include broader stories. And some of the ideas I have really do have a comedic tilt to it. And then there are other stories that I have percolating that I haven't quite tapped into yet, that I know are going to be coming from a deeper, darker side. So yeah, you know, like I said, it's just, I'm open to these different opportunities, and I'm also excited to kind of delve into different ways of expressing myself and being a creator of opportunity for myself and other people.
Love that. And I guess going back to you as a comedian, right? What's it like performing in such renowned venues like the Comedy Store, et cetera? Like, how do you prepare for these performances? Because I imagine people like, they prepare all their like jokes and everything like that, and also their mindset, right? Like, what's it like, I guess, being in that position of, I guess, getting on stage?
Right. I mean, the comedy store that I performed at was at the one in La Jolla. So I have yet to perform at the one in Hollywood, but I'm just putting it out there that someday soon it will happen. But, I think with comedy, for me specifically, I have a well of material, and I do go up to mics to work new material out. And I go into shows with an idea, with a rough plan of what I'm going to do. But then it helps to kind of feel out the crowd. And I think that's where kind of being an educator and a yoga teacher have come in handy for me, is because I'm really sensitive to people's energy. And if they're not reacting or responding to my material in a specific way, I'll really try to tilt in terms of my delivery, or maybe I'll tweak the joke a little bit, or maybe I'll even just completely change gears and go in an opposite direction with different material that I have that might be more well received to a specific group. But every audience is different. And for me as a comic, like, I've really tried to adopt the mindset of it's never the audience's fault, right? They're there to have a good time, and every audience is different. Every venue is different, but it's your job as the comedian to really feel out the crowd and give that specific audience a show. So I do get nervous sometimes before I go up. I think it would be weird to not be nervous in a lot of situations. But, with yoga and all those things, like, those things really help me kind of manage my nerves before going up onto a show. But with any comic, I think it's just really like the practice of getting up on stage, and like getting up on stage again after you have a really crappy set. Like, just last week I did a show and I was like, I don't think this is going well. And the younger version of me, like a less experienced comedian, Camille, might have been like taking it personally. But, in that specific situation, I had a lot to learn. And there was a comedian that went up a few comics after me that really, after he went up, I was like, that was like a masterclass in comedy. Like, thank you for showing me how to do this better.
Absolutely. And I got to say, being a comedian is such a hard thing to do. Just, even just feeling out the crowd. Like, I can imagine, like, there's so many different crowds out there who have different senses of humor, right? So you're kind of just catering towards, I guess, the audience. Like you said, it's never the audience's fault, right? They're there to have a good time, but your job is to, I guess, help them achieve that. So yeah, comedy can be a very challenging field. So I guess, how do you handle those, I guess, tough crowds, or like maybe moments when like a joke doesn't land?
Right. I think the community that you build around yourself, in any field really, but especially in comedy, like that night that I went up first, that's always kind of a tough position to go up. So when I got off stage, I was like, oh my God. And the other comics that are friends of mine already were like, nah, that was like, this is a different environment that you're in right now. It's not a typical comedy club. It was like this bar, but like, I did get some laughs. I didn't completely bomb. So they were like, you did great. Like, don't worry about it. And then we had the conversation of like, you have to go through sets like that to get better. You can't just like kill every night and think that you're a good comedian. Like, that's just going to make you better to be put in these situations that are just a tougher crowd, so that you can have more within your comedic like repertoire to fall back on and learn how to just navigate these awkward moments. Because I think, like, people do want you to do well when you go up on stage. And if you can just kind of get them on your side, and some crowds just might be a little bit tougher to do that than others, but ultimately people do want to like, I think they want to have a good time, and that's why they're like watching comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, like, whenever I'm listening to comedians, whether it's online or a show or anything like that, For me, something that's funny is basically like something relatable, right? Like if I can relate to, for example, a joke or like something they mentioned on set, then I will like instantly laugh. So I guess, how do you handle that kind of aspect to kind of cater to, like you said, just like improvising based on like the audiences, right? Because everyone has different experiences too.
Yeah, it helps me to see who's in the audience. You know, if there's a lot of men, I'll cater my jokes, or like I'll choose a different set of jokes. If there's women, I know that I have a set of jokes that I'm like, okay, these are jokes that I wrote for women. These are jokes I wrote to educate men about women, you know, like, if I have like an older crowd, you know, I'll talk about like the generational differences between me and my parents, that kind of thing. So it does help me to see who's in the audience. And then just kind of getting up on stage, yeah, you know, like you throw out the first few jokes and just kind of test the water, and then you go from there. So you do have to be pretty adaptable. I'm not a comedian that does a lot of crowd work. Like I don't really talk to the audience, you know, that's not really my thing. And maybe someday like I'll incorporate it into my sets. But right now, like I really like focusing on writing my material and developing it, working it out in a way that is really, I guess, structured in the sense of like, this is how a joke can really like just basically like the setup and the punchline, you know, like ultimately when you boil it down, like there's going to be a setup and a punchline to every joke that people say. But yeah, I just kind of play it by ear and see who's in the audience, what they're responding to. And if they're not responding well, then maybe I'll like add a little bit here and there, or I'll take different parts of the jokes away based on what people are giving me.
Do you ever get those moments where you just blank out? Like I've had these experiences before when I just like completely forget what I'm gonna say, especially in front of an audience, right? And that can be, I guess for me, embarrassing, at least in my experiences before. But like, let's say you're a comedian, right? And you're like killing it, you're making people laugh, and then do you ever get those tendencies where you're like, oh my god, maybe I'm gonna forget the next joke, etc., stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that happens to a lot of comics. There was one specific show I did a couple years ago where I just was going through my set, and then I was like, I don't know what's coming next, you guys. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to say next. I know I wrote a set list out, but let me think for a second. And then it came back to me, and I was like, oh, and it was kind of like a play on some like traumatic, it wasn't like a play on something like deeply traumatic, but it was kind of like playing on stuff that had happened to me. And I was like, that's why I forgot it. I was trying to block it out of my mind. Like my brain was just like not letting me access that because it's a memory that should be made fun of, but didn't want to come back to me in that moment. So I think you kind of just play it off. Yeah. That is actually part of the reason I am grateful that I did do improv classes, because I can kind of like just, you know, banter a little bit here and there if something doesn't go exactly as I planned. But I do feel like I have enough material at this point that if I didn't know what was coming next, I would just pull something else out. Yeah. Yeah. I would be like, you know what? I'm going to tell you about this now. Let's just change topics.
See, even that made me laugh. Like, for example, like if someone just plays it off, right, and just keeps going depending on the situation. Like, for example, for example, you forget your line or whatever, right? Like when you mention, guys, I totally forgot what I was going to say. You know, like that already made me kind of laugh. So I guess just like, you know, just playing it by ear and just letting it go, letting it happen. Because I guess comedy is, you know, it can be on the spot. It can be like, you know, anything else. But for the most part, I think comedy works when you're just playing it off That's just
yeah. And telling the truth, I think a lot of people just appreciate, like when I was doing that show last week, I was like, are they laughing? Like, they were smiling and nodding, but they weren't laughing. And I was like, this is going well, right? And then they started like laughing. Like if you just kind of address the awkwardness, because comedy is about building tension and then releasing it.
Yeah.
So if they feel the tension, if you can say anything to kind of like open that valve to release the tension and like let the laughter come out, people I think appreciate that too.
Love that. All right. And you have a show on Friday, and that's pretty exciting. And we would love to have our audience know more about it. So can you share more about that and what the audiences can expect as well?
Yeah. So my show this Friday, September 22nd at 7:30 p.m. is at the Comedy Chateau in North Hollywood. And you can expect a great lineup of comics, really great food at the Comedy Chateau, good drinks, great company. It's a fun venue. It's a great room to be an audience member in and to perform in. I like I said, it's kind of play it by ear. I have an idea of what I'm going to talk about. I have been doing more material about being Filipino. I've been doing some of that lately. And also I'm a new mom. I have a 10-month-old baby. He's beautiful. His name is Raphael. Thank you. So I have quite a bit of new material about what that journey has been, and how it's changed, kind of who I am and, my relationship. So I think a lot of that is also very relatable for folks.
And what time does this start? And specifically, I guess, your set?
So it starts at 7:30. I have no idea when I'm going up. They kind of tell us the night of. So you'll have to find out when I get there or when you get there. And then I also have a show on October 6th, also in Hollywood at the Hollywood Comedy. And that's also on my Instagram. So you guys can find it there too if you're interested in going to that one. But yeah, I always have shows coming up and always developing new material. That's one of the most beautiful processes of being a comedian, is you never know when inspiration is going to strike with new material to write about. So yeah. Absolutely.
And for people who are listening, please support Camille Aragon's journey on her comedic tour or whatever you want to call it. So yes, be on her shows for sure. Tell us about your recent films, right? The Perfect Couple and also Good Filipino Kids. And it seems like they're both Filipino films as well. So what were those experiences like and what drew you to those roles?
Yeah, there's something really beautiful happening right now in the Filipino creative community. There's so much inspiration and this community that is really just growing and connecting with each other to develop these projects that tell our stories. With the Perfect Couple, I feel like that was just the universe giving me this beautiful opportunity through Mike. He came to me with this idea, with the script, and he told me that he had me in mind for the character of Cassie, who's the woman that gets married in the film. And I read the script and I was like, oh my God, this is such an entertaining concept. And the people that we met through the film were just really beautiful, wonderful, incredible artists. The woman who played my mother is Princess Punzalan, who is a legend in the Filipino acting community. Yeah. It's just like, so I don't know. It was just like a beautiful, beautiful experience, filming that. And, it's, without giving away too much, the character I played, she is a Harvard educated lawyer in this case. And she is, about to wed a Harvard educated doctor. So our parents are very happy about that. Hijinks ensue. And, there's the magic of storytelling that reveals different aspects of people's characters that you don't quite see on the surface. And I think that's really reflective of a lot of different issues that we as Filipinos experience in our own families. And in good Filipino Kids, I played an auntie, a judgy auntie, who I think many of us can also relate to. I was, I think, 8 months pregnant at the time when we filmed that. And I'm just in a short scene for that film, but it was a really fun experience to get to film with other Filipina actresses and to work with Andrew Acedo, who is just such an amazing storyteller and director. Just so grateful to have connected with him and to see how he's continuously developing new projects. So yeah, right now I feel just so grateful that there is this surge of Filipino creatives doing this work and giving opportunities to folks like myself and the people that we get to work with and connect with through these projects. So yeah, like communities like Film Creative, like these are communities that I just am so inspired by, to know these people and to see the incredible work that is being produced by folks, like, and just the heights of people's careers that are really taking off. It's wonderful to be a part of, and I couldn't be more grateful to be a person in this community.
Absolutely. I'm so inspired by that, Camille. Thank you so much. And by the way, for those of you who are listening and you're going to the San Diego Filipino Film Festival 2023, Good Filipino Kids is playing on October 4th at 4:30 p.m. in the shorts program called Outside the Box. So definitely check that out. I will be there. I don't know if I'm gonna make that shorts program, but I'll definitely be there at the San Diego Filipino Film Festival. And I really gotta see Good Filipino Kids, because I've seen The Perfect Couple and it was really good work. So you did an amazing job as well.
Oh, thank you.
In that. But yes, I definitely do agree that, you know, we have been seeing more and more of these Filipino communities, organizations, I guess, coming together and helping each other out. Like you mentioned, Film Creative. That's just such an amazing thing to see for me. And because I haven't seen much Filipino films, I guess, over the years, but now I'm seeing more and more, right? So it seems like more Filipino voices are being heard. So I wanted to ask this question, like, where do you see, I guess, Filipino projects or films or, I guess, artistry going in the near or distant future?
Yeah, what a question. I think Filipino people are really at the height of the entertainment industry in a way that we've never been before. And I think with the number of Filipino people that are really making an impact in this world through their art, you know, like we have like some of the most famous musicians right now are Filipino or part Filipino. And, you know, like it's amazing to see them really like be shining stars for so many of us. And like the younger generation of people coming up are going to have these role models that maybe those of us in our 30s like didn't have. And I just see more diverse stories. You know, we're not a monolith. There are 7,000 plus different islands in the Philippines. There are 700, you know, different dialects within the Filipino like languages. And there's just so much opportunity to tell so many different stories that like really can start to be reflective of the diversity that exists within our own nationality. You know, being Filipino doesn't mean, you know, you speak Tagalog. It doesn't mean that you were born in the Philippines. It doesn't mean that, you know, like you look a certain way. You know, I'm excited to see just different faces telling these like variety of stories, because I think we're just starting to break the stereotypes that folks have of what Filipino people are. And I think that for a lot of us that are in entertainment now, we're excited to be able to do this work here in the States, because maybe, you know, I don't know about folks listening, but for me, I was told maybe I didn't look Filipina growing up. Like, oh, you look a little mestiza. Oh, you could be an actress in the Philippines. But I was like, but I grew up, I was born in the States. Like, why would I go to a country that, like, you know, maybe I visited the Philippines as a child, but like, why would I move to a country that I don't like, I have familiarity with, to pursue something that, so basically, you know, like basically you're telling me I'm not good enough to do it here, and I have to go somewhere else where I probably also won't feel like I fit in to do something. So that was one of the messages I got growing up, which is why I think I didn't really pursue the arts until well into adulthood. So hopefully we're, you know, doing this work and the younger generation sees that it's possible for them, and they have more resources and more doors open to them to express who they are. And through that, you know, we share all these different stories and messages and perspectives, and we open hearts and minds with what we're sharing through our own hearts and minds.
I definitely agree with you, because the Philippines has such a rich history and also a rich culture. You know, there's Filipinos all over the world, and they all grew up differently, right? So I just want to see, I guess, more of those stories being shown, right? Whether it's like through film, whether it's like some piece of art or anything else, because I think there's just something special about the Filipino culture and history, and I think it deserves to be shown more and more. And I'm glad to see it more and more now with like film festivals, with like communities and organizations as well, and also seeing comedians like you
Yeah,
represent.
Absolutely
But yeah, super excited to hear more about that. And it looks like we're almost out of time, but I do want to segue into advice for listeners. As you know, the podcast also is about asking experts like you about advice. So the first one I have is like for individuals who are aspiring comedians or actors, actresses who want to break in, right? Like for the first time, like what advice would you give them? And even those people who are changing career paths like you did.
Yeah, I think the first is really to be a consumer of what, and a student of what you're interested in. So watching as much of the type of work that inspires you. And then I as an educator, obviously, like I think that educating yourself and really taking on that role of a student in a craft is the work that you have to do to understand how to really work with what the art is. You know, like I think with comedy, especially, a lot of people see the final product of people's specials and they look like they're saying it for the first time on stage. And so people think, oh, that looks easy. I could just go up on stage and talk for an hour and people will laugh. But that's actually, you know, that hour of material that gets put up on Netflix is actually 10 plus years worth of experience and work of going on stage and writing jokes and crafting and recrafting and editing and bombing and then, you know, finding your audience and building your audience. So educating yourself, I think that the fastest way to get from where you are to where you want to be is to find a teacher that has gone through that experience, and just really finding what you love about it, because there are going to be times where you doubt yourself and you doubt your journey, but to remember why you got into it in the first place, and your community. I think that for me, especially being a new mom, I think with, you know, just kind of where I am in my career, I still feel very much a beginner in a lot of ways, and having had a baby, there's a lot of new material there I can talk about in comedy, but it's also a shift in identity. And for me, what has really, really helped is being in community with other mothers who are artists. So for comedy, it can be really tough because it's a very bro-y culture. You kind of like come across a lot of young guys telling terrible jokes, and you might not fit in there, but one of the best pieces of advice I got is to really like find your people. So for me, that has been other moms, other women of color who are doing this work and really accepting that they themselves are artists, and that is a part of themselves that might not be satisfied by just being a mother. So I'm really grateful for the other mom artist friends that I have.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I would also say, like, there's also tendencies, like, for example, performance going on stage. There's a lot of nervousness that's coming in, right? Like from time to time, especially for those who are less experienced than veterans. So for people who, feel like they're going to break down or be nervous, like before a set or a stage, or any sort of project or whatever, like what advice would you give those people?
Yeah, that you got to learn how to self-regulate. I think that for me, I felt like going into comedy, having had 15 plus years of experience practicing yoga, like I knew in my nerves, like on a cellular level, how to regulate my physical body. And just the hours of practice of doing that has really helped me maintain composure when I go on stage and I'm feeling really nervous. And, there's still moments when I still feel those nerves and maybe my voice shakes a little bit, but I've really been, I think, successful in being able to show up as my best self in a lot of situations when I didn't feel ready to be or worthy of even being on stage with these different people. You gotta fake it till you make it. And I think that if you can learn how to regulate your nervousness, your nervous system, basically, if you can learn mindfulness techniques, that really is, science is really catching up to what these ancient yogis and meditators for generations and centuries have been telling humanity for as long as humans have existed. You have to learn how to breathe. You can't just rely on the automaticness of your breath, because you're going to be affected by the different stressors that we have in life. So if you can learn how to self-regulate, that's going to help you and get you really set up for success in being a performer.
Absolutely. That's such a good piece of advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the last one I had is basically sort of about giving up, because a lot of, for example, creatives who get criticized or whatever the case may be, they don't get past the stage when people say that they're not good enough, or for example, they're not where they're supposed to be, right? Because they're just starting out, right? And then they end up giving up. What advice would you give those people, I guess, to keep them going to pursue their passions and goals?
Yeah, I think giving up is the idea of giving up. Maybe people don't necessarily talk about that so much, but I think on any journey, especially a creative journey, when you're giving so much of your personal self to it, there's bound to be moments where you feel challenged and it becomes a thought, oh, why am I doing this to myself? I could just get a stable job and do the things that I want to do and go on vacation when I want to go on vacation. And, I don't have to put myself through this. But like I said earlier, I think it's remembering your why. What is the reason that you got into it in the first place? And for a lot of folks, I don't think that, trauma is a driving force in everybody that is an artist. But in my own personal story, it is, there is a part of myself that I heal every single time I get to do my art. And for me, it's really thinking about that 13-year-old version of myself that needed this 39-year-old version of myself to be doing what she's doing. So I think about her, when I really doubt myself, I don't want to let her down, and I'm doing a lot of this with her in mind. So, remembering your why. And I think it would be a lot easier for me to quit if I didn't already have the people around me who believe in me. Because when you doubt yourself, if you have a community of people around you who remind you of your greatness and reflect back to you your greatness through the art that they're doing and putting out there, it's just going to continue to keep you inspired. So find your people, really stay connected to those folks, and, be giving of yourself with those folks. Even just doing this podcast, I'm grateful to you for letting me share my story, and for you to come and see The Perfect Couple and my comedy show. Like the way that we support each other in the community is really important too.
Yes, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for those kind words. And also, having those same communities support each other and, have each other's backs. It's such a beautiful thing for sure. And for people who want to laugh, please go to Camille's comedy show on the 22nd in North Hollywood. So, yes, Camille, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. Learned so much from you. And it's been an amazing episode so far. And I want to segue to shout outs. And I want people in the audience to know where they can find you in social media, etc. So I guess just shout out your social medias, etc.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok. What else is there? Threads. Now Discord at the Camille Aragon. That's 2 L's in Camille. And I would love to connect with folks that are interested in learning more about the journey of comedy and, even like the healing world, the intersection of yoga and the arts is, I think, a really interesting place to have common interests. So if that's you, I would definitely love to connect.
I love that. And also projects you want to shout out, either stuff you've already done or are working on, etc. Projects you want to
shout out. So The Perfect Couple, I think that's still on the film festival circuit. Good Filipino Kids. Keep an eye out for different stand-up shows that I have coming up. Those are always around the corner. And I think that's what I have going on right now that I'm putting out there. So and any opportunities to connect and collaborate with folks, I'm open to.
I love that. Thank you so much, Camille, for this episode. And I can't wait for people to hear, and I can't wait for people to go to your show and your future shows as well. And I just gotta be, I'm just super grateful you're here, Camille.
Thank you so much, Juan. This has been a great experience. Thank you so much for all of your support and, like I said, letting me share my story and your platform.